Right, well, part of this project, converting from carby to EFI, is I need a high pressure fuel pump. And while most people, when they do this swap, they choose to go with an external pump, I want to go with an internal pump with a hanger bracket. I think I'm going to get a weld-in kit from Commodore, but my 45 litre tank, as it is not actually deep enough. There's a minimum height for the pump hanger, and this is about 15-20 mil too short. And it also being 45 litres means it's absolutely tiny. And what I really want to do is increase the capacity of the tank. I'll do that by adding 50 millimeters of depth, about 2 inches, because I've got a 2-inch lift kit. So this hump that the diff sits in is currently 2 inches away from the diff because of the body lift. So if I increase the depth of this by 2 inches, you know, the diff will sit up in here in its factory position, and it'll give me some more capacity, and it will give me the height to be able to put the Commodore pump hanger in. To that end, I've got my hands on this little beauty right here. It's a bit rough, as you can see. I actually got this from You Pull It, of all places. I never would have thought in my life that I'd see another wagon like mine at You Pull It. They're just too old, but amazingly, at the yard there was one of these with the round headlights, which means it must have been a 1980 or 1979, which is older than this one. Anyway, the good news about that being so old is that it has the same fuel tank as mine. So I'd never thought I'd get the chance to get a second fuel tank that's exactly the same as mine. But here we are. So obviously it's a bit, second hand. It's had a rough life. The car was absolutely trashed. Like, the wing mirrors had rusted off it, literally. It was so rusty. And getting this out was an absolute battle and a half. I had to leave. I got it half out, and then I had to leave to buy a sawzall, reciprocating saw, come back and finish it off. Plus the tow bar was, for some reason, had a piece of tow bar that came forward and bolted into these two holes here. Pulled this back, the tank back, for it to drop down. I needed to remove the tow bar, which wasn't going to happen without acetylene, because the bolts holding the tow bar on were just chunks of rust, completely seized. So I used the sawzall to cut the tow bar off about here, 10mm plate like this wide, just slice that off, and then I was able to cut that bolt off, and the whole thing just fell out of the car. Yeah, I felt like the king of the world after that. That was a lot of work getting that out, but things you have to do for a rocking horse poo. So I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to go about this yet. Haven't decided yet. The first thing to do really with this is to clean it up. I get that fuel sender out if I can. Have a look inside, see what it looks like. Just give it a general clean up. So here we go. Let's pop this bad boy open and see what we've got to work with. Is it going to be rusty inside? Who knows? Well, this doesn't look too bad so far. I've seen worse sending units. Oh, the smell. Oh, jeez. That smells bad. Okay. How do you even describe that? That must be... Who knows how old that fuel that was in there was. I mean, they drain it at the wrecking yard, but you pull that plug out, it doesn't actually get everything out because there's a little lip inside that has the threaded part, so the fuel doesn't drain any lower than the top of that threaded insert. This is the first time I've been seeing it. From what I can see, it doesn't actually look that bad. On closer inspection, that orange stuff is like jelly. I think that's the old fuel that's evaporated and left the varnish behind. There's a big chunk of something there, and I think the pickup tube, which is just to the right there, is rusted away. Yeah, I've never seen that before. It's actually like jelly. See if I can get some on my finger. No, I can't quite reach. How about that? So this is the fuel pump hanger, surge tank, whatever you want to call it, MRA module reservoir assembly, more ridiculous acronyms. This is the fuel pump and everything out of a VT Commodore. To facilitate that, Raceworks sell the kit. They make this ring, weld in. I got the steel one. I'm going to put it right there. That allows me to drop this in, but it's going to have a bit of height, extra height poking up above the tank. Downside, if I sunk that down into the tank, then when the tank's full, the level of fuel is going to be completely submerging that stuff. I don't know if that's a problem. I don't think so, but I'll figure that out when I get there. So now it's time to fill this up with water, seal up all the pipes so I can actually fill it up with water, grit your teeth and sink the angle grinder into a perfectly good fuel tank. I've been putting this off to last because I'm really nervous about stuffing it up, but nothing ventured, nothing gained, hey? This whole flat section here is only 50 millimeters. Once you're done with the radiuses at each side, there's only 50 millimeters of flat section here. I need that to be 100, right? So I'm going to need to use the whole lot of both tanks. So if I was to cut one 50 mil above the flange, then I need to cut the other at the flange to get the 50 millimeters total height increase. 5 millimeters above the flange will get away from the radius. Then the other tank I need to cut 55 millimeters above the flange. Should be over here somewhere. And then it will have this whole flat section plus another whole flat section from the other tank. This flat area then will be a total of 100. Tank I'm keeping, I scribed all the way around and I put the tape all the way around, thinking that's where I was going to cut it. And then as soon as I got this one up on the bench, I was like, hang on, I need to cut pretty much on the flange, keep the top of that one, and the other one I cut 50 mil above the flange and keep the bottom of that. So I think we're ready to do the first cut. What a nightmare, marking out 5 millimeters away from the flange to get away from that radius in the corner. So I'm going to be cutting at the bottom of that tape in there. I think I'm going to cut this tank first because it's the worst of the two, and you know, I'd rather practice cut on this thing first. Well, that wasn't too bad. Got that half off. That's the bit I'm going to reclaim and use on the other tank. And you can see the rust coming through there and there. I think I'm not going to weld it back together in this condition. As you can see it better on the bottom half. I think that's the zinc galvanizing, crystallizing and coming off of the base steel, because that there is very shiny and clean steel. Like that, it's almost a mirror, really. But this crud coming off it, I think that's the zinc from the galvanizing. But I don't think I can weld it back together in this condition. There's too much crap peeling off of it. Cutting it wasn't too bad. Of course, when it was full of water, it weighed about 50 kilos. Couldn't move it, had to roll it over here. It's a bit sketchy cutting through the side with the water pissing out, but wasn't too bad. No explosions, so that's the main thing. On to the next one. And there you go. I'm either on the way to making one good tank, or I've just destroyed two perfectly good tanks. But this was my good one, the pristine one. That and that. You can see how good this was. That just looks brand new. The top here. Like I said, I'm really sad to be throwing this in the bin, considering how good a condition it was, being nearly 45 years old, to be replaced with that mess. But needs must. If I wanted to keep that, I would have had to weld in a strap, a 50mm high band all the way around, which would be twice as many welds, twice as much work, and double the chances of leaks. I think this is a better option. Making one good tank out of two. These vent tubes here, I'll be drilling out, cutting off, whatever, welding them up, because the vent tube's already in there. We're well on our way. That's a big step in the right direction. We have raw material to start fixing up the fuel tank. The pump hanger needs to go down about 20 mil, I think. But to do that, I need material to make stuff out of. So now we have raw material, we can get started on that. And I tried TIG welding some of that and failed miserably. It's just too thin and very dirty from being covered in petrol for 40 years. So I think I'm going to MIG it, but I'm using 0.6mm solid wire. I got a mini spool because I'm never ever going to use a 5 kilo spool's worth of 0.6, because being so thin there's so much on the spool. But to run 0.6mm you need a few things. So you need the liner to fit the gun. That's 0.6mm liner up to 0.9mm. So you definitely need that, and of course the contact tips, 0.6mm contact tips, and the drive roller, 0.6mm groove on the drive roller. So you can't run 0.6 without that stuff. It just will not work. It's too fussy. Being so thin, the machine has a hard time pushing it through the gun if you don't have the right liner, and if the tips are wrong, the hole's too big, you just won't get good contact and your welds will be crap. If you use 0.8mm, if you use the wrong sized roller with the 0.6mm, it won't even feed, it will just slip. So you need all this stuff to make 0.6 run nicely. Ooh, good timing. It's important when you do MIG welding that you have some sort of a brake on the wire spool itself, so it can't just freewheel. Because if you're welding at high settings, the wire is going to be spinning off here really quick. Then you let go of the trigger, it stops suddenly, and the spool will just keep on going and unravel all your wire inside here, which is a real mess. So that's what that little spring's for on this machine. Springs and washers. That's great. Just a bit of friction so it can't freewheel after you let go of the trigger. Right, here's what I'm thinking. So from the top of that connector to about here somewhere, it was 30mm. So I've made a ring, 40mm of 1mm, and that's the mounting flange down in the bottom of it. It's not welded in there yet, it's just held in with friction. I'm going to sit down like that. Once I file the corners, radiuses, I think it's going to be okay. The clamping ring still fits down in there, in the sheet metal ring, and obviously I'm going to have to cut a channel for these hoses in here, coming out the side here somewhere. I cut a trough in the top of this tank, and now the only real drama is these vent tubes are all in the way. I'm going to have to cut them all off and remake them, but them's the breaks. I do like making life hard for myself, don't I? But this is also, I don't have to cut a huge hole in the floor of my boot, because it would be about right in the middle of the boot floor. So I think this is going to be worth the effort. Here's where we're up to. Making a big mess and lots of noise. This is the channel, the trough for the hoses. It's going to go in there nicely. Just about to tack it all in place, trim all the excess off and stick it up in the car and see what clashes. But I think we're going to be okay. The only thing I need to do is make sure that this trough is clear all the way through here, because there's a corrugation in the floor that sits in here. Well, that was a lot of fun. The It's all welded, fully welded 100% on both sides, as much as I possibly could. So I tacked it in place, I welded it on the outside all the way around, doing little steps to control the heat. And I did lots of spot, not one continuous bead, because this original tank being 0.6 mil, it would just blow through, even at like 30 amps. On the 0.6 mil wire, couldn't have done it without the 0.6 millimeter MIG wire. That made it so much easier. And then once it was welded around the top, I went inside and welded around on the inside as much as I possibly could, but I couldn't get around here because it's being so close to the side. I just couldn't get my MIG gun in there. And there was another spot over here that I couldn't get to. But apart from that, I think it looks okay. And I'm definitely going to paint the inside, gloop it up completely with tank sealer around where all the welds are, and then yeah. But just for now, I've got the two halves of the tank taped together, and I got that bolted down. The annoying thing was my sheet metal ring that I made. Of course, once I'd welded it, it wasn't round anymore. It's a tight fit. I'm still able to bash the mounting plate for the pump into the ring, the sheet metal, but the clamping ring being exactly the same diameter as the bolt, the steel ring, means it wouldn't go down inside there anymore. So I this aluminium ring, I chucked it up in my drill somehow and used the angle grinder with the drill spinning and sanded off the outside diameter just until it dropped in. And yeah, that's really nice. Worked out okay. Still be strong enough to hold the pump down. And I think we achieved the goal of getting it below the level of the floor. I'm going to space the whole tank down, obviously, from the chassis rail. I can make these blocks maybe a couple of millimeters taller to drop this down enough that this all misses the floor. But it's going to be a really fine balancing act between spacing that down and having the bottom of the tank contact the diff. We'll figure it out. I think I've got enough that I can play with. I'll be able to get it in there without the bottom of the tank touching the diff. I think so far so good. Really happy with how that's turned out. I better get the hoses out through there. Well, it's only really one hose I need to get out here, the supply line, but the electrical connector wire is going to come up alongside the hose, wrap around here and plug into that. Well, you join me on this lovely blustery, blowy, wet summer's day, and it's currently about 13 degrees, and I think I found the solution to my zinc problem. If you remember, this is the top half of the tank, and it was from the donor car, the scrap car that I found at the wrecking yard, and the zinc coating was just completely falling off it, and I was worried I was going to have to wire brush all the inside of this to get it off. But I found the magic solution. I think it was about 30% hydrochloric acid, and it is doing an amazing job of cleaning off the steel. So that's what it kind of looked like before, with the zinc turning to powder, and that's what it looks like after just brushing some of this acid on it, and it fizzes up and just washes the zinc right off. It's amazing. Really happy with that. And even better, look what it does to the rust. I just painted a bit on here and this was very rusty, but look at how it's cleaned the steel up. That's just amazing. So yeah, I think that's going to be the go. Well, here we are. The tank is back together in one piece. Now, I didn't detail the process of joining the two halves because I didn't do it myself. I got a mate to do it, and he didn't want to be identified or documented on the process, but the good news is it's back together. And it doesn't matter how ugly it looks, because once it's up in the car, you could stick your head under the car and you'd never even be able to see this section that we've done because it's all right on top of the tank. Anyway, I've just been leak testing it and fixing up the pinholes, of which there were about a dozen. There was 1 or 2 on the main seam around the middle. There was a few on this top ring, and yeah, nothing I can't handle. What I've just been doing is, never mind all these hoses, all they're doing is blocking up all of the possible outlets. See, that's looped around blocking those 2, and then I've got a little airbrushing compressor just pumping in like a couple of psi, maybe less than 5 psi. It doesn't even register on the regulator. Pumping it up, blocking off the hose with a clamp, and spraying some soapy water like that all the way around. And when I find some bubbles coming out, I dry it off with a rag, circle it with a Sharpie, do that for the whole tank. Then I depressurize it, take the fuel pump out because most of the welding has been done around the top here. Have to take the fuel pump out and yeah, just light up on the pinhole with the TIG, with not even any filler metal. I just 30 amps maximum, just melt around the pinhole, flow some metal around, and then you can actually see it just suck up and completely close up and go smooth. When you're actually welding with the TIG, you can see a lot of detail. And yeah, once that's done, I'll do that on all the circle marks that I've made, and put the pump back in, pressurize it again, do the soap water again. I couldn't weld those 3 holes up because I had bronze brazing around the edge of the metal. I couldn't weld that, so just solder. As you can see, that middle one there is leaking, and you see the bubbles coming out. That's what I've been looking for on all the weldments, all the welded areas. Like I said, it's not pretty, but it does not matter at all what it looks like. The important thing is it seals. Just like that, the Franken tank is complete. Just about to bolt it into the car. I've made lowering blocks for the front and back. Go on there. And the one for the front I've made, it's got little hooks on the bottom, so I can just slide that into the hooks at the front end. So I only have to hold up the back end while I fit all the bolts in place. That front block also has 1 screw that holds it up into the body, so it's sitting under the body at the moment. Because I don't have space to disconnect and reconnect that electrical connector when it's bolted in, I had to plug that in, then bolt the pump down. So I've made a little pigtail lead, so I can unplug the pump while the tank is still in the car. I can unplug it from further away. Same with the fuel supply. I can't actually get to this connector when the tank is in the car, so I've made a little extension with a barb. The return and the vent here, I've just looped them around. Now I'm using the old supply line at the front. I'm going to use that as the return, just because I didn't, just there's fewer hoses coming up this way into this area. But I realized yesterday that the return here drops the fuel straight back into the bucket, which maybe that's a beneficial thing. I don't know. I guess I'll find out if I have fuel starvation problems when the tank gets low. But if that's the case, then I'll just drop it down and extend the return line up to, I think it's the middle one here. Yeah, let's just whack it in there and see what it looks like. Conversion complete. The fuel tank is in. Give you a quick look at that. It fit perfectly. Could not ask for better. The lift blocks and everything, just perfect clearance to the diff. It's not touching the floor up top. Arrangement with the hoses is all good. When I put Penultimate for the first time, I've left that fitting there loose. That's the return line, so I can easily just disconnect that, run the fuel pump, and catch the fuel that comes out of there, just to flush out all the lines, all the fuel rails, the filter, just everything. I can flush it out, then just quickly zip that back on there, tighten it up. So that one there is the supply to the engine. That's going snaking around to the other side of the tank, going on top of the module reservoir assembly, the pump. And there's two wires there. They're the power and ground for the fuel pump. They've got bulkhead fittings into the floor there. So that fuel system is now 100% complete. And that was the biggest headache, the biggest job of this whole conversion was that fuel tank. Everything is done up this end. Just need to put oil in it and coolant. I've put oil in the power steering reservoir. That's how confident I am that we're ready to go, because that's the hardest thing to get the fluid out of once it's in there. I will disable the injectors for the first crank and unplug the coil pack. I'll crank it up to get oil pressure, see if it reads on the gauge, see if my oil pressure sensor mod actually works for the old dash. Then I will reconnect the coil but still leave the injectors disabled. Then I'll spray some brake clean or something in the air cleaner box and get it to fire just on that. And I'll be able to hear if the coil pack is firing correctly, if I've got that wired up correctly, and if the firing order is correct. If it sounds like it's going to work, then I can just enable the injectors, get the fuel pump to flow through. I'll be able to read pressure on the laptop from the sensor and yeah, fire it up on fuel that time. Then check the cooling system for leaks, the fuel system for leaks, power steering system for leaks, because I've obviously done lots of soldering and joins on there. But we are that close. I'm literally just waiting for the coating in the fuel tank, the sealer on the inside. That has to cure for 4 days before I can put petrol in it. That's all I'm waiting for. Once that's done, petrol in, turn the key. We're that close. I'm so excited. But anyway, thanks for watching and keeping up with the project. If you're still watching this far, next video will be engine running. Cannot wait.